Well, after a few months off, we are finally back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new season of GRID Live Encore, Season 3 of our show here. Joe Samaniego graciously filling in tonight. Brandon Craftsman unfortunately couldn't make it, but he's looking forward to a new season as well. Joe, thanks again. How are you doing? It's been a good off season, but I can't wait for Daytona this weekend. I got to tell you.
Cannot wait for Daytona. Cannot wait to talk about all the racing we're going to have at Daytona. And then, of course, on you guys, all the series we're going to be following. It's going to be an exciting 2024 season for everyone at the GRID Network.
Yeah, it certainly is. And we're going to highlight some of the major silly season news that broke over the offseason tonight, as well as looking ahead to Daytona. But first, as always, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your support means the world to us. It's what allows us to continue to grow our motorsports media outlet here at GRID Network, what allows Joe and I to go out to Portland every year, and Joe to continue to go out to Portland multiple times a year for all the different series that are racing there at that facility these days. So thank you all so much. And if you like what you see tonight, you want to join them, we would very much appreciate it. Or if you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can donate through Buy Me a Coffee or our YouTube Super Chats or Super Thanks if you're watching after the show as well. Now, Joe, I know obviously we've got a lot of news to cover in terms of what's happening at Daytona this upcoming weekend, but one story that broke earlier this morning, our friend Kobe Lamb has put in our group chat, Jack Crawford, who's going to be racing in Formula 2 this year, a young American driver returning to that series. He is now a part of Aston Martin's young driver development program. So what do you think of that news?
Very exciting news, very exciting opportunity for Jack Crawford. I know Aston Martin, a lot of fans speculating, rumoring of what's going to happen with their two drivers. Fernando Alonso, he's been in silly rumors, especially after the shocking move by Lewis Hamilton. Could he be moving elsewhere? And then Lance Stroll, which we know a lot of folks have been talking about, is he really worth keeping in that seat for another year post-2024? We know there's a lot of contracts going to be up for Jack Crawford, being the young driver development program. I would say if this was Alpine a couple years ago, you're going to end up stuck in Formula 2 lower series. But there's potential. He has some strong performances here and there. I can see him in the F1 seat. It's just a really exciting opportunity for him. And I think good timing overall.
Yeah, I don't know that he's necessarily just 1 year away from Formula 1, but I know a lot of people have been high on this kid for a long time, and it's great to see him partner with such a brand as Aston Martin. And again, silly season is going to be absolutely wild in Formula 1, as our own Josh Birch was mentioning on one of our GRID Tonight shows within the last couple of weeks. It's something like 13, 14 seats up for grabs in 2025. Who knows what's going to happen with the Mercedes shakeup? Obviously, Lewis Hamilton going over to Ferrari is going to be a huge story to follow, and a lot of pieces still to fall into place after that. So we'll keep an eye on that, and obviously you can stay tuned for more F2 and F3 coverage as 2024 rolls on. In the meantime, let's take a look at Daytona this weekend, and let's start with the ARCA Menards Series. Joe, a massive entry list, 50 cars entered this weekend, one of the largest entry lists we've seen, not just for Daytona, but for any ARCA race in a long time. The field capped at 40 means some entries are going to be sent home, something we haven't been able to say about ARCA in several years. So, Joe, I know we've talked about this on Encore before, specifically with the East and West Series. You've gone out to Portland sometimes. You only see as many as a dozen cars, maybe 13, show up to some of those races. A car count like this, an entry list like this, is this a sign ARCA may be turning a corner here?
Hopefully this is a sign that ARCA is turning that corner, and we're going to see higher fields throughout the season. One of the things we got to consider, though, is with the super speedways, we know this is a track, Daytona International Speedway, where a lot of teams see it as the golden opportunity, position themselves in the right place in the right time when things go wrong for the others and they get collected in the big one, the big crash. They could have a top 5 finish, top 10 finish, or a surprise win. I think one of the big surprise stories from last year, that's a good example. Mandy Chick on our Win in Motorsports, we talked about how just log the laps, finish the race. Surprised everyone's expectations that year. So you got a lot of drivers, a lot of teams that see this as the opportunity. Hey, we could go out there. We won't be towards the back of the pack in, say, Michigan, or a short track where you're going to really be dependent on the equipment, the setup, and the driver experience. This is just avoiding the trouble, avoiding the mistakes. So I'm very excited for this 50-car lineup. I think it's really going to be the determination of is the corner being turned for ARCA? Will be the remainder of the season. Once we get 2-3 races into it, the short tracks, the dirt tracks, will we see that high car count? I would hope to see more teams getting the sponsorship so we could see these higher car count. I don't anticipate we're going to have 50 cars in Illinois trying to qualify, but if we could even have 25 cars per race, even get up to the 30 range, I say the healthy ARCA series is back at that point. So we're really hopeful to see that. And I just think it's a good sign that not just for ARCA, but in Daytona, I can't remember the last time any of the series had 50 vehicles in there. This is just huge field for any standards lately at Daytona for speed weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I remember 2007, the first season I watched full time, and I think we had 61 at Daytona for the Cup Series race and the 500 in 07. But it's been a while since we've seen a number like this, so it's certainly great to see. And unfortunate that some of the entries won't make the race, but that I've got to tell you that we've one of the things that has happened with these smaller car counts is we don't see an emphasis on qualifying, and we talked about that just recently here on these programs. That how can we make qualifying more interesting and matter more, bumping the field count up or the entry list count up rather, and capping the field size at a certain number, actually having some stake in qualifying certainly goes a long way in doing that. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be paying attention to the practice speeds and qualifying this weekend, and then obviously a strong field for the race. One of those entries being Shane Van Gisbergen, who we've talked about quite a lot on these programs over the last year or so. He's here in America full time, racing in the Xfinity Series. That's going to be his main series, but he's going to run some Cup races as well, some Truck Series races, and this ARCA race at Daytona. He'll be in a number 28 car for Pinnacle Motorsports. Shane Huffman will be his crew chief. Joe, what can we expect from SVG? You followed his career much longer than I have. Do you expect him to pick up the super speedway racing like that, or is it going to be a situation where it takes him a little bit of time to adapt to it?
I gotta say, isn't it? I never thought we'd be talking about Shane Van Gisbergen and ARCA on this program, so this is very exciting to see Shane Van Gisbergen doing this. When it comes to this race, I think Shane Van Gisbergen, knowing how he is, he wants to go out there and perform as strong as possible. He doesn't want to go in there thinking, let's just finish the race, gain the experience, gain laps, gain what some folks would call respect of, I'm not doing anything too crazy to try to earn the veterans' respect. Because remember, big picture, he's looking into NASCAR, not racing a full season with ARCA or coming back to ARCA to race next year. This sort of reminds me of a little bit of when Juan Pablo Montoya made his first ARCA start at Talladega. And he had some pretty good, impressive runs going that race. I think he had some contact, fell towards the back. I could see Shane Van Gisbergen being towards the front, trying to do the best he can, because he knows if he could get a surprise win, steal the headlines, that would steal the headlines, I think, the entire weekend, regardless of what happened in Daytona 500, will be who won the Daytona 500. And by the way, Shane Van Gisbergen won the ARCA race, and he's still on his way towards NASCAR. So I think Shane Van Gisbergen is motivated to go there, get a top 10 finish, top 5 finish. I think will be a great deal, great pretty much weekend for him to say, we got a top 5 finish. I do not see him just saying, hey, we had a great, wonderful weekend. I stuck around 20th. We got up during pit stops. We avoided the trouble, and we finished the race in 20th. I don't see that in his DNA. Everything he seems to get into, whether it's the Cup Series car or Rally Championship car, he really tries to get the most out of the car, the most out of himself. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what he's done. And he has the connections with Trackhouse. I can only see him talking to Ross Chastain, Dan Suarez, and other allies trying to gain insight of what to do in Daytona.
Yeah, and for anybody that thinks, top 5 or a win might be a little bit too ambitious or out of the question, you mentioned Juan Pablo Montoya. He finished 3rd that day in his ARCA debut, so it is certainly within the realms of possibility for a driver with the talent level that Shane Van Gisbergen clearly possesses. And, I've got to be honest, of course, I've said on this show last year that or on Grid Tonight rather, that, I thought that this start that he's being forced to make in ARCA to gain approval for the super speedways, might not be entirely necessary given a driver of his caliber and his experience and being a Cup Series race winner, having to run an ARCA race to get approval for Xfinity. Again, I understand why they're doing it for the consistency. I just don't know that, it looks right on paper for a driver who's already achieved so much to have to step into this series here, but I'm sure he's going to be happy to have a track time and have the experience, and we'll see. I'm sure he's going to make the most of it, and like you said, Joe, might even turn some heads here.
Turn some heads, and speaking about turning, I think the big thing Shane Van Gisbergen needs to be careful of and mindful of when we come to the bump drafting, we've seen this in the Cup and all the levels. Picking the right time to bump draft, because if you did get it wrong, you could turn the car in front of you, and 50% of the time, that car could spin and take you out as well too. And that's the last thing I think Shane Van Gisbergen would want to do. So I think he's really going to be a little bit more careful, try to push if they're going to at all on the straightaways. But I think that could be one of his bigger concerns is where could he make a mistake? It will be in that portion when it comes to the bump drafting. Losing the draft, that's one thing. If you get freight trained, everyone goes low and you went up high, you could rebound. But you turn somebody by bump drafting, especially in the tri-oval where the cars are very unstable, that's where I think the bigger issues could occur. And that's, I think, an area Shane Van Gisbergen might play a bit conservative is the bump drafting.
Yeah, and let me be clear and clarify as well. I'm not saying throw him into bump drafting with absolutely 0 laps of practice or anything, but he doesn't need any of that. I'm saying, could he have just gotten that in a couple of Xfinity Series practice sessions or in off-season Daytona testing? I know we don't have nearly as much practice time as we used to, and that's a whole nother discussion we could get into. We now qualify for the Daytona 500 before we even have a single lap of practice, which I think is a little ridiculous, but we'll save that discussion here for another day. Maybe we'll talk about that on our Thursday Daytona Duels pre-race show. So we'll just have to wait and see where that conversation goes later this week. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be talking about that again in the coming days here. Now, Joe, another name on the entry list that might have surprised some people, Justin Bonsignor is going to be stepping into the number 30 Red Jones racing car that Frankie Muniz drove, and we'll talk about Frankie a little bit later and what he's doing in 2024. But Bonsignor, really big name in the modified series, had another strong run at New Smyrna Speedway actually this weekend as well in their season opener. Do you think he could surprise some people in his debut in a situation that is entirely different than what he normally does in NASCAR racing?
I believe so. I mean, he's a young racer. Well, 36 years old, so I'm not exactly the youngest, like in the 20s, but this is a great opportunity for him. I think where Shane Van Gisbergen has a path towards NASCAR, for Justin, go out there and really just have a good, solid race. Top 10, I think, will be a great day for him. Because at the end of the day, where he is at his stage of his career, if he could get a good, solid finish, bring the car home in one piece, potential more opportunities. We know that team, last year, they had a lot of attention. This year, best way they could get attention, get a top 10 finish, have Justin there, and then hopefully some more opportunities here and there. Of course, sponsorship, that's going to be the big thing. Getting the track time, the experience, you're going to gain that by finishing the race. And where Shane Van Gisbergen, as I mentioned, he's not exactly there to try to make friends and, become a regular in ARCA. This could be a good opportunity for Justin to become a regular in ARCA, potentially move up to the truck series at some point, depending on how things go. So overall, I'm pretty excited to see what he could do. I know a lot of Whelen Modified fans are going to be following to see how he does this race weekend. But I think for him, he's going to be hovering around the 15th through 10th place, just trying to log those laps. And if he could position himself in the top 10, that'll be huge for him and that team.
Joe, we talk all the time about how New Hampshire is the modified Daytona 500. And when you think of what New Hampshire looks like in a Cup Series car or a K&N car or an ARCA car back when they ran there, it's completely different from what this Daytona race looks like. So you want to talk about it, Shane Van Gisbergen being out of his element a little bit. I think Justin Bonsignor certainly will be as well. But again, there's no denying his talent behind the wheel of a race car. He's a multiple-time champion and race winner in the modifieds. And, given the success of modified champions before him and getting into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, I think that's something that is not an unrealistic projection for Bonsignor's career by the time he hangs up his helmet. So it'll be interesting to see how far he wants to take this. Again, like you mentioned, Joe, being in his mid-30s, probably not looking to make it to the Cup Series at this stage in his racing career. But who knows? This could lead to some more opportunities for him, maybe in the Truck Series in the future. We'll just have to wait and see. But I'm sure a lot of modified fans in particular are going to be keeping an eye on that number 30 car this weekend in the ARCA Menards Series.
Yeah, ARCA Menards Series, I think this is going to be one of the races that could really steal the spotlight throughout the weekend. We have a good race, great competition, and especially with Shane Van Gisbergen in the story, I think a lot of folks will be watching this race a little bit more than last year and the years before. Qualifying, I think this is going to be one of the more exciting qualifying because you're going to have that element that so many teams are going to have to go home. So I think this is definitely a race you do not want to miss this year the ARCA 200 at Daytona.
All right, let's move on now to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And Joe, we might see some new names at the top of the leaderboards this year. Kyle Busch Motorsports and GMS Racing both closing their doors at the end of 2023. I got to tell you, for me, Joe, it hasn't really sunk in yet. Has it sunk in for you that these two teams who have had so much success over the last several years in this series are not going to be on the grid at Daytona this weekend?
I would say the news that they were out has sunk in. That's like, okay, they're not going to be there. We've seen teams, especially in the truck series, they'll come and go. But I think once we're at the track, the competition, you're not going to see that familiar 51. That's why I think it's going to really be different. And then in general, just the fact that, it's been for the longest time, there's always been Kyle Busch Motorsport vehicles out there, Kyle Busch doing a race here and there. To not have that, I think long run, that's where I think it might create a void. Like, we don't have that here anymore. But with that said, it could be wide open, this field. I mean, when it comes to favorites, gee whiz. I mean, we could talk about the championship favorites later, but you no longer have that team of Kyle Busch is going to be the team to beat each and every weekend. It's now, I think, going to be a lot more complicated, but I think it's going to be really fun. And overall, we'll just see. I mean, there was an era before Kyle Busch was there. Now this is sort of that new era where he's left, and I wouldn't count it as permanent. I would be shocked if when Brexton gets older, we don't see some sort of reincarnation of Kyle Busch Motorsports.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth there. I don't know that this is the end of all time for Kyle Busch Motorsports in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure he's got a plan for Brexton, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Again, Brexton's really still a kid. He's got a good 6 to 8 years still before we're probably having these conversations in a more serious manner. Although I know that is his goal for his son, and I'm sure Brexton's goal as well. So we'll look forward to that when we get there. But still plenty of time to figure those plans out. But Joe, I am completely in agreement with you. Those trucks have been front runners for really the last decade and a half now. I feel like with that program that Kyle Busch built, and to be clear, he is still going to run a few races with Spire, who bought the Truck Series assets from his team. And I think Spire's got an interesting program that they're trying to build up here as well, and not just in the Truck Series, but of course with their Cup team in 2024 and beyond. But going to be interesting to see who might fill that void. And Joe, that's the question that I'll pose over to you now. Obviously, we still have teams like ThorSport who have been around forever in their own right. You've got Tricon Garage who have a strong program. Who do you think might be some of those teams that could take this opportunity with KBM and GMS no longer being there, rise to the top and take their place as the top teams in the Truck Series?
Well, those two for a start easily. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't be. Ben Rhodes, I think he's going to be a contender too. I'm really curious to see what Grant Enfinger is going to do. I mean, he switched teams. He's now with, I think it's like CR7.
CR7, right.
Yeah, so CR7, Grant Enfinger, I mean, considering what happened last year at Phoenix, I think he's motivated. It's going to be a matter of where that team is at the time of racing. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with Nice Motorsports. It wasn't too long ago, Nice Motorsports, Carson Hocevar, we're talking about them quite a bit. Now Carson's gone. I believe it's Matt Mills that's going to be in that 42. So I'm really curious to see if that team is just going to be up towards the front. And then the experience of Matt Mills, how is he going to play out throughout the year? Ty Dillon, he is going to be back in the Truck Series. I'm really curious to see what he does. It's Rackley Racing, I think, or something like that.
Rackley War, that's right, the 25.
Rackley War. So I'm really excited to see what Ty Dillon could do. Could this just be a revitalization of his career? Because I think a lot of people have just seen him as sort of, okay, he's in the Cup Series, but he's not doing anything there. He's being outperformed by his teammates. Now he's going to go back to the Truck Series, but he's no longer a young, upcoming driver. He's now the driver that has been in the Xfinity Series, the Cup Series, now coming back down. I think he's going to be very motivated. Let's not forget Rev Racing, Nick Sanchez. I think that's going to be another driver to watch. So overall, I think it's going to be wide open between a lot of these drivers. I think the big thing is going to be once we hit the mile and a half ovals, we could really get an indicator where everyone racks up. For Daytona, though, it's going to be, I think it's just going to be a little bit chaotic. Then Front Row Motorsports, let's see what happens with them, because I know they always seem to be pretty good, but they lost their driver, so it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, but they got a good replacement in Lane Riggs. I think a lot of people are very excited for him to have this opportunity. He's done a lot with his limited starts that he's gotten leading up to this season. Now he's got a chance to run championship caliber equipment that Zane Smith ran the last couple of years. So we'll see what he can pull off. Another team that I would keep an eye on, I look at McAnally Hilgeman Racing and how close they came to a championship last year with Christian Eckes ending the year as strong as he possibly could with a 1-2 finish. I know that Phoenix truck race was so chaotic with all those overtimes and how that race ended, but they survived the carnage. They pulled through there. Now Christian Eckes knows that he can win the championship. He just has to get to that championship four. Tyler Ankrum and Daniel Dye are two drivers that I don't expect them to be running up front as much as I expect Christian Eckes to be, but I still think can give you a solid performance here and there. And if they pull their weight throughout the season, we might look at McAnally Hilgeman as one of the new top teams in the truck series going forward. So I'm very curious to see what happens with that program. And Joe, you mentioned Nice Motorsports as well. Bailey Curry, I think, has had some strong runs here or there. Maybe not as consistent as Carson Hocevar or Ross Chastain before him. I think the undisputed top two drivers in Nice Motorsports history. But Bailey's got a good opportunity to come back this year. I'm excited to see what he can do as well. And then Ty Dillon, I think this is a big year for him. This is a big opportunity for him to show that he still has the potential that he showed the first time he was in the truck series when he was running for his grandfather's team, nearly emulated his brother Austin by winning a championship, moved up to the Xfinity Series, won a race there, then got a chance in the Cup Series, but hasn't had too much success. I think sometimes taking a step back, especially when you're a veteran like that and you've run as many races as Ty has, when you have as much experience as Ty has, this could be the shot in the arm that he needs to have some success and revitalize his career. And, we've got a lot of drivers that we're going to be keeping an eye on. And Joe, I understand maybe one more you want to bring up before we move on here?
Yeah, Stuart Friesen. I know.
Sure.
He hasn't won in a couple. He did win last year. I don't remember if he won the year before, but he sort of reminds me a little bit like Ricky Rudd in the Cup Series. He just seems to always be towards the front, fast. May miss out the race here or there just because of bad luck, things not going right. I'm just curious if you're thinking maybe he could have a return to victory lane this year with that team. And especially, I just think it's like, okay, he's always seems to be up towards the front. Could he be a potential dark horse contender for maybe the championship?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at his results now. Very up and down, very inconsistent. Last year, he did get a win at Texas in 2022, but Joe, that's his last win in the last 4 seasons. He only has that one win at Texas. Of course, he narrowly missed out on the championship 4 in 2022. And I remember on the Encore show, we played that interview. He wasn't too happy with his ThorSport teammates, not explicitly administering team orders, but you could kind of read the room and tell what they were doing. And he was like, look, I'm just out here by myself. I didn't have a teammate to lay over and give them a spot or anything. So, I'm sure he's more motivated than ever. And like you mentioned, Joe, hasn't had a ton of wins in the last few seasons here, but certainly has a lot of talent behind the wheel, and he'll have the equipment that can get the job done for him. So that's another good name to keep an eye on as well as we look forward to 2024 here. And we'll move on now to the final race of the series that we usually cover that's going to be happening this weekend at Daytona, and that's the Xfinity Series. It's been a bit of a procession for Richard Childress Racing the last couple of years here. Austin Hill winning the previous 2 iterations of this race. Joe, do you think he might be the favorite to go 3 in a row here in this Daytona season opener?
He has to be one of the favorites easily. I mean, I don't see why he will not be towards the front unless he gets caught up in trouble. But I'm thinking about, especially junior motorsports, if they don't wreck each other and are towards the front,
yeah,
we have a good shot at it too. But this race especially, I feel, has really become something of just an absolute wild race towards the end half. If you're coming towards the end and we haven't had that big one, we're in the 3rd stage, I feel almost all bets are off. I feel it gets to the point where it's a little too chaotic. We're not talking truckloads chaotic, but just as people are making those aggressive moves, trying to get a win because they know you're in the championship playoffs. So Austin Hill has to be an early favorite, but junior motorsports, especially Justin Allgaier, if he could be up towards the front, if he doesn't have a bad day or get caught in trouble, Sam Mayer, I think those are 3 good drivers right there. And really, it's just going to be a matter of survival, I think, because overall, handling is not going to be too much of an issue. We're under the lights, so it's going to be a cooler track. I see where it's just going to be okay. Survive it. Don't lose the draft. Even if you do get in trouble, but you can still patch up the car good enough under the damaged vehicle policy, you can still survive and win. We've seen some beat up cars win this race before, so I think this could be one of the more wilder races. But Austin Hill has to be on the very short list of favorites entering Daytona.
Joe, that was a massive fumble by Junior Motorsports last year to be running second, third, fourth, and fifth with just a couple of laps to go and only have a couple of cars even see the finish of the race and, fall all the way back as far as they did. Certainly an opportunity that I'm sure they regret not being able to capitalize on, but they have another chance to make up for it this year. And, like you mentioned, a lot of great drivers from that team, can put themselves in the right opportunity at the end of the race. We'll see if they can capitalize on it this season. Another driver looking to capitalize on an opportunity he's been given here, Frankie Muniz, is going to be running in Joey Gase's car here at Daytona. He's also going to run a partial schedule for the team in 2024, as he just announced. Joe, I know we kept an eye on him very closely last year in the ARCA Menards Series. A lot of people did. You had outlets like People Magazine and TMZ talking about ARCA. Whoever would have thought that would be the case. But Frankie Muniz brought a lot of eyes to the ARCA Menards Series last year. Now, I'm sure we'll do the same when he runs Xfinity. But are you surprised that he has made this jump so quickly in his stock car career?
I am surprised. I mean, last year, my expectations were not that high for him, to be honest. But he sort of made me a believer, like, okay, he's really taking this seriously. He's not just getting in the car and then, oh, that wasn't fun. I don't know. No, he seems fully into it. So, of course, next move would be try to get up to Xfinity level. Without the wins, though, it is something I do question, like, okay, he could get the sponsorships to make it work. He could get the ride. It's going to be how he's going to perform. Now, he has run at Daytona before in an ARCA car. He's done Talladega. So he's not just coming into the super speedway blind. But we're talking a different field of drivers that some of them have come from the trucks and worked their way up. Some of them from ARCA worked their way up. Driver with driver development deals for Cup Series teams. It's a whole different ball game. This is not going to be the same level of competition. I think it's going to be a little bit more fierce. Competition is going to be more aggressive throughout the races. You're going to have those stage breaks too, which that second stage could sometimes be just as chaotic as the third stage, especially towards the end when you got more playoff points. I think he's going to have a handful, but I think really, depending on how he performs behind the car, that's really when I'm going to be able to say, did he make the move too quickly? Because if he makes what we would call a rookie mistake, okay, even then, he made a rookie year at the ARCA Series, a rookie mistake in the Xfinity level. I think it's forgivable. If he comes home with a solid race, we'll be praising like what a wonderful job he did. He's really taking this to the next level. But don't rush it. Maybe come back at Talladega or maybe a speedway like Michigan where the ARCA Series did run. But I wouldn't just throw him in at a track like, say, Dover or Bristol, where it's really going to be amped up. So Daytona was the appropriate one. Is he making this move a little too quickly? For my take, I'm saying yes, but if you can have a solid day, just then don't rush into it. And I think he'll be set. But overall, it's going to be really interesting what Frankie does and the media attention that's going to follow for the Xfinity Series.
Joe, I think about Frankie and I think about his age, being 38. And I know that he knows that, it's not like he's a early 20-year-old coming into this series like a lot of young drivers are, maybe even a little bit younger than that in some cases. So I think it's in some ways understandable that he recognizes that he has to take these opportunities when he's given them because, the reality is he's not going to have as many years ahead of him as another Xfinity Series rookie might, given where he is at this stage in his life and in his career. But I do agree with you that generally speaking, if you look at an ARCA resume and you see one full-time season with one top five, I know that, Brett Jones isn't necessarily a Venturini car, but it's still, solid equipment that can give you a good run here and there. One top five and one full-time ARCA season. I don't know that in most cases we'd be saying that that's a driver necessarily ready for the Xfinity Series jump. Now, obviously, Frankie brings a celebrity status that very few other drivers in this race are going to be able to bring. I think his success is going to be the Xfinity Series success or NASCAR success in many respects with how he might be able to run. but I think it's entirely unreasonable to expect him to be up front contending for wins, especially, and again, no disrespect to Joey Gase or his team, but it's not like he's getting in a Stuart Haas proper Ford factory support car of that level. So I think that expectations should probably be tempered quite a bit. But, again, you're not going to find anybody who is more passionate, who's more driven, who's more determined to make this work and make this succeed than you are in Frankie Muniz. So when you look at it from that perspective, I think that, he certainly has an opportunity to surprise some people, but I just don't know that we should be expecting him to be a front runner or contender, at least not any time in the start of a year. And again, we'll see what his schedule looks like and how many races he's set to run. But it's going to be interesting to follow nonetheless.
Yeah, and one of the things too I mentioned about like the rookie mistakes, as long as he doesn't make a mistake like Kevin LePage in Talladega when he came up from pit road in front of the field and caused that huge one, that really, essentially tarnished Kevin LePage's reputation and the spotter and everybody. If he doesn't make a mistake like that, like if he makes a mistake where bump draft in the tri-oval, spin out somebody himself, that's something where like, okay, you're a rookie, you're still learning the car, the competition level has gone up. That's something forgivable. But if something like what happened with Kevin LePage, or just something where we're just all on Monday on Encore talking about, could you believe this occurred? That would be a big setback. So overall, I think you hit on the head that we shouldn't be expecting him to go out there in the top 10. If any of all the drivers we talked about, if he finishes in the top 20, that's huge. If he completes all the laps, bring the car home in one piece, wonderful job. But don't go out there, make a boneheaded mistake where then people are going to be saying, well, he's not ready, because that could be a huge setback to your racing career.
Wonder what GRID Live Encore would have looked like in 2008 after Kevin LePage pulled out in front of that field at Talladega. That would have been very interesting to get our reactions back when that happened. But again, hopefully we don't see anything like that from any of the drivers this weekend, and we have as clean of a race as possible. Now, from one Ford development driver to another, let's talk about Hailie Deegan, Joe. It's been 3 tough years in the Truck Series, a best finish of just 6th place a couple of times. She's got an opportunity with AM Racing this year to run a full Xfinity Series season. Is this it for Hailie Deegan? Is this the year that she really needs to take that step forward to prove that she can make it in NASCAR?
I think so. This is the Xfinity Series. This is different than the trucks. We know the Truck Series has the reputation of the drivers, they may lack the respect level that a lot of people in the industry want to see. Some of the races could be a little bit too much to handle. I mean, Phoenix is a prime example of that. Now you're in the Xfinity Series. You're going to have drivers that are going to not be racing you that hard. With that said, you're going to be aggressive, but they're not going to just spin you on the restart just to spin you out, gain the position, put us under yellow. For Hailie, we know she's done, I believe, one Xfinity Series start in Kansas.
Vegas, but yes.
Vegas. It was a mile and a half. So it's going to be really interesting to see how she approaches this year. Do not consider Daytona as an indicator, because that could be a wild race, as we talked about. The mile and a half, I think, is going to be really where we're going to have to see how she's doing in the Xfinity car compared to everyone else, because you're going to have Vegas, you're going to have Kansas later on, Charlotte, all these mile and a half ovals. That is where I think we're really going to have to see the big step up in performance. But that said, it has to be a step up. You cannot be, I mean, she's going to be a rookie in this series, but I can't say you're a rookie to the point where, well, you finished 30th or outside the top 20, but it's your rookie season. No, she's done a lot of track time with the Truck Series. Is it different? Yes, but there's not that many tracks that she's going there first time. So overall, I think she does have to step it up. The mile and a half is going to be the area where we could really, I think, see the progress as she goes on the season. And then the second half of the season, I think it's really going to be hard, because when you come to tracks for a second time, granted we have a lot less compared to years past, that's where a lot of people are going to be looking, okay, how did she do the first time here? How did she do the second time in the Xfinity car?
Yeah, I think that's always great indicators. What can you do the second time you come to a track. And I think Deegan was even saying that when she was running the truck series, she felt a lot more comfortable in her sophomore season, going back to tracks for a second time, having that base knowledge from the previous year. Joe, I look at her truck results. I look at AM Racing's results in the Xfinity Series last year with Brett Moffitt, who's a Truck Series champion. And, to be honest, they haven't had too much success in the Truck Series themselves either. I just don't know that this is going to be a combination that we can expect to set the world on fire, especially, like you mentioned, considering it's Deacon's rookie season in this series. So I think it's a little bit unreasonable to expect top 10s, top 5s, even wins right out of the gate. But, again, she has to show some level of potential here or there, which, just to be honest and to be frank, we didn't see too much of that in the Truck Series, or not nearly enough, not nearly as much as we were expecting based on what she did in the K&M West Series and to a lesser extent in ARCA. It's 2024 now. She's had, a few years of the Truck Series underneath her. And, Joe, to your point as well, she has more stock car experience than Danica Patrick had when she came in to run a partial schedule of Junior Motorsports in 2010. So I think, despite the fact that, again, I don't know that AM Racing is necessarily Junior Motorsports level of equipment, I would still like to see her at least be able to rise above what Danica was able to do when she first came in to what was then the Nationwide Series in 2010. It's certainly a make-or-break year for her in my book because, again, based on the performance that she showed in the West Series, we didn't really see that come to fruition in trucks. Now, certain drivers, Harrison Burton comes to mind. He didn't win a truck race, then he got into the Xfinity Series with Joe Gibbs Racing and turned a lot of heads, won a few races. Now he's racing on Sundays in the Cup Series. Sometimes different drivers can adapt to different cars in different ways, and even though the Xfinity Series is a level above the Truck Series technically on the ladder, like you mentioned, Joe, the Truck Series is a lot more chaotic. Maybe this style of racing is going to suit her a little bit better. I think the true test, like you mentioned, is going to be once we get into the heart of the season on the mile and a half. If you think back to her ARCA season, she ran runner-up at Daytona, and then, was kind of in the middle of the top 10 for most races, most of the mile and a half. I think had another runner-up finish on one of the dirt tracks, which, again, was a background that she's been strong on before. But that's going to be the true test for me, is how can you run like at Vegas when she had a solid performance in the one start, but she did at the end of the 2022 season. That's going to be the key for me, and we'll see where she ends up at the end of the year and leading into 2025 and beyond. I don't think this is going to be a one and done, put her in the Cup Series next year unless she just completely blows all expectations away. This is certainly an important year for her career. I know we've really been saying that every year for the last couple of years, but given how much Ford is backing her, how much fans have been expecting her to take that next step forward for several years now, this has to be it. This has to be the year when she does just that.
Yeah, the last couple of years in the Truck Series has felt stagnant, her results. Like, it hasn't drastically improved. Like, you'll see a rookie to this next year, more top 10s, more products. I felt we have not seen that, really. She had some races where, hey, she's doing good, but then issues, and then it's just nothing to show. This is going to be different. Here, I think she has to show, like, okay, you're competitive. You're up there, at least having good performances, solid days on the track. And then we need to see that progression in the second half. Because if it's another stagnant year, I could almost see Ford saying, okay, one more year, it was stagnant. But then we're going to be having this discussion again in 2026. Like, is this the year? And I would say at that point, easily 2 years on the Xfinity level, you cannot be stagnant at this level of competition anymore. Some drivers in the Truck Series or even Xfinity Series, they go up another level, whether it's the Xfinity or the Cup. All of a sudden, they turn in heads, doing better results. She has to do that. She has to do it, because I just feel like it has been stagnant the last couple of years where her teammates outperform her. We're just not seeing a whole lot of progress. And I think that's going to be the big thing, is when she gives the feedback to the team, do they feel like, hey, she's progressing and understanding this car? I think that's a huge part of everything too, because now there's more room to make these changes with the Xfinity car.
Yeah, well, and Joe, last year, especially moving over to ThorSport Racing, because I know a lot of people were saying, well, David Gilliland's team, they've had some success here, but are they really, is she really in top equipment? Is she really with a top team? When you're driving a ThorSport truck, that excuse is, just simply not able to be made. And, again, Joe, I must point out, I know we co-host the Women in Motorsports show together. She still has not done something that Natalie Decker did with Nice Motorsports a few years back, and that's finishing a top 5 in a NASCAR National Touring Series race. We'll see if she can get that done in 2024 in the Xfinity Series with AM Racing. So lots to look forward to. And that's going to wrap it up for our season opening show this year on GRID Live Encore as we look ahead to the season opening races for NASCAR at the Daytona International Speedway this weekend. Thank you all so much for watching tonight. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, and most importantly, right here on YouTube. Thank you all so much for your support over the offseason. We're continuing on that journey to 1,000 subscribers and beyond. So be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And again, if you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after our show to consider joining our Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in GRID Network to help keep us on the air throughout 2024 and beyond. And as you can see, our long-term goal of $500 per month will allow us to begin attending races on site on a more regular basis, and that will only expand our coverage for you, the viewers. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit the links to buy me a coffee in the description box below. Any amount will help us continue to grow this motorsports media outlet here at GRID Network, or like I said at the start of the show, if you're watching on YouTube, we now have the super chats enabled as well. Now, on Wednesday, don't miss GRID Tonight with Kobe Lambeth, Josh Birch, and Matt White. Women in Motorsports will be back this week as well. Joe and I will have that with Isha Azim. We've got some special programming this weekend, like I mentioned, with duels. And Joe, I believe we might have a roundtable episode coming up tomorrow as well.
Yeah, myself, Jonathan Field, and Matthew Bro, we're going to be having a roundtable. We're working on the show, and you're going to be seeing that stream come up shortly on YouTube. So busy week for everyone at Daytona coming up, the big one. So.
And don't miss our special Daytona 500 pre-race show shortly before the start of the 500 on Sunday as well. Joe, any final thoughts before we sign off for the night and look ahead to 2024?
2024, I think it's going to be a good year overall. I think with the Xfinity Series, Truck Series, we got a lot of changes, so it feels pretty wide open. And then the ARCA Series, if they could maintain a good, healthy car count, I think they're going to be really fun to watch. And I think Daytona, if they have a good race, that's going to be the showstopper. Essentially, that's going to steal the spotlight from the other series, and especially Shane Van Gisbergen. And you know he's going to get a lot of media attention. Big weekend in Daytona. I'm very excited about it.
I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm looking forward to all the storylines in the ARCA Menards Series in particular, but also Trucks and Xfinity. A lot of drivers, new faces and new places to follow. Should be a good weekend. For Joe Samniego, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next weekend to recap Daytona right here on GRID Live Encore.